it's better to have a binational state than a conflict. But I still hope for one democratic state, not binational state. Yes, I do believe. I think it is actually more likely to happen. The problem is, I always hoped that it will happen through negotiation, consent. I now feel it will be happening after a collapse, destruction, vacuum, and so on.
Do you still believe there are some cracks? And even though Israel is so fiercely attacking and going on with the war?
Yes, the fierce attack just are there because of the cracks. They're not a solution to the cracks. The aggressive policy of Israel in the north is not going to change the internal problem of the Israeli Jewish society. It's not going to strengthen the Israeli economy. It costs a lot of money to have this kind of policy. It's not going to make Israel more popular in the world. It's not going to make the young Jews in the world feel more identified with Israel. So, I mean, all the cracks I point into the books as endangering the structure which is called the State of Israel are not going to be going to disappear because of the war. In fact, the war will make them even more extensive in many ways because of all the problems that a war brings with it. And there's an additional layer. I don't see how this war ends. And I don't think the Israelis themselves have any idea how it ends. They are now feeling very powerful because they killed Nasrallah. But there's already a new leader for Hezbollah. And like the Hamas and Hezbollah are not just organization or commanders, it's an idea. And both ideas are connected to the fact that the State of Israel as it exists is not being accepted by the Palestinians, is not accepted by the Arab world, and is not seen as legitimate by many other people around the world. And a war in Lebanon is not going to change it, even a so-called successful war in Lebanon.
Is it going to expand more and more, do you think? Or...
Yeah, it's difficult to say. So far it seems Iran is very reluctant to be drawn into it, but I suppose there is a limit for how tolerant they can be. But the problems of Israel are not Lebanon and Iran. The problem remains the fact that Israel needs to oppress millions of Palestinians, and they don't have any alternative to that oppression. So I think the war will eventually end in some sort of diplomatic arrangements about the border between Israel and Lebanon, not before a lot of innocent people die, as always happens with stupid wars. But Israel would still be faced with the main problem, and this is the millions of Palestinians it occupies, colonizes, and the millions of refugees around Palestine who are all seeking a solution, freedom and liberation. And therefore I think the war is a bit of a distraction here. What is important is that we are in the middle of a third Palestinian intifada. It started on the 7th of October, but it still goes on in the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, and it has the potential of drawing also the Palestinians and Israel into it. And that is the important historical process, not the war against Lebanon or Iran. The historical process which is important is the fact that after 76 years of Israel's existence, the Palestinians are still there, resilient and resistant. And this is what will determine Israel's future, the fact that the Palestinians are not going to give in or give up. Palestinians are not only resisting occupation, colonization, or in the case of the Palestinian citizens of Israel living in an apartheid state, they dream of a Palestine that was there before 1948. And that Palestine was, first of all, existed. Israeli narrative says there was no Palestine before 48, but there was. And in that Palestine, Muslim, Christian, and Jews coexisted. And that Palestine was culturally, economically, and geographically connected to the Arab world. It was not part of Europe, it was part of the Arab world. And I think all this shows us that this myth that Palestine was an empty land with people who had no identity and did not belong to the rest of the Arab world is now proven to be totally wrong. And this is the violence we see is the clash between the Israeli image of what Israel is and what the rest of the Arab world thinks Israel is. And that's a very powerful clash and gap between the two perceptions.
Today, after an entire year war and destruction, how do Israeli people see their government in this conflict? Do you have like an idea of the general mood?
Yeah.
There was lots of protests at first, but what about today?
First of all, Israel is a divided society. Half of it is messianic, excited about the situation, believing it's an historical moment that will bring back the glory of Israel from the Bible, and Israel would be a new theocracy, and so on. So you have that part. These people definitely are not depressed. They really think they are part of a great historical moment of changing the whole reality. The other part is totally depressed, traumatized, but they cannot offer an alternative, and that's the problem. We can. A good example is the attitude towards the hostages question. The first part that I described, the first camp, doesn't care about the hostages. They gave up the hostages. They think it's a small point compared to the big picture. The other half thinks this is the main issue, but it's helpless. It understands the government is not going to really do a deal on the hostages. They demonstrate desperately against it, but they don't have the political power to change the government's policies. Many of them are leaving because they see no future in Israel. We don't know the numbers because the numbers are hidden by the Israeli Statistics Bureau, but we know it's a huge number, it's a large number. These are people with little horizon, no vision. The others have a vision and horizon which is messianic. That, I think, is a good description of Israeli Jewish society today.
And what's their perception of what's happening in Gaza? What's happened?
Yeah, it depends who, again. The first camp believes that as bad as 7th of October was, it provided a great opportunity to settle Jews in Gaza again, to get rid of many of the Palestinians by expelling them to Egypt, and having a good model of what should be done to the West Bank. The other side believes that Gaza is, Israel has the right to continue the genocide in Gaza, but I don't think they are interested in any political solution because they are focused, understandably maybe, on the issue of the hostages. So they don't have a clear vision about Gaza. They have a clear vision about the hostages. And it's interesting that the first camp still wants a picture which would say we won in Gaza. They say we cannot, for them the war in Gaza is not finished. For the other camp, the ones who demonstrates now in many numbers in Tel Aviv, the war is over in Gaza. And it's over without the release of the hostages. I think there is a small group of Israelis not big enough, who understand what Hezbollah is doing by saying, if you want to stop the war in Lebanon, stop the war in Gaza. There is a small group, but it's an insignificant group that understand that actually it's much better to stop the war in Gaza and reach an agreement with Hezbollah than to believe that by force you can destroy Hamas and you can destroy Hezbollah. But the majority of Israelis believe that Israel has the power to use military in order to solve political problems.
Ever since the end of the 19th century, which is where you start, there was one thing that was recurring in this whole history, which is propaganda and the way this history has been taught.
That's right.
Which is, I believe, it's a very big issue with everyone's perception.
That's right.
People in Israel, people in Palestine, people in the other parts of the world.
That's right.
Even the British, they told the story in a way, and etc., etc. Today, something even more interesting has been happening because we're living in a different world and propaganda has changed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also through social media, which is something that we have already seen in the past 20 years, especially with the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. We've already seen this, but in this case, I think it may be crucial. Do you believe it is in some way going to change the world because it is changing perception of people, it is creating some cracks?
Yeah, I do think so. I think that Palestine is a symbol for many things. One of the symbols is the gap between the mainstream media and alternative media. The sense of many, especially young people, is that the mainstream media is in the service of the political elite. And by the way, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about democracies or non-democracies. Of course, it's easier to assume that in countries which are not democratic, that the mainstream media is loyal to the regime. But what is new, I think, is the sense that also the mainstream media is loyal to the interests of the political and economic elite in each country. And therefore, the coverage on Palestine is the coverage that the political elite wants, not what the media sees. And the alternative media provides a coverage that is, in the eyes of people, more authentic, more correct. So I think we have here a situation by which people can have access to information not through official media, which is very important, I think. It also has a lot of dangers, of course, because the alternative media can have a lot of fabrication, manipulation, of course, but basically on Palestine, the sense is that if you watch Italian TV, you get one story, which is mostly Israeli story. And if you go to the alternative media, you get the reality, not the Palestinian side, but the real, what's really happening. I don't think people here believe in a civil society that there is a Palestinian narrative and an Israeli narrative. I think they believe that there is propaganda and truth. And the bad thing that happened to Israel is that what Israel says is regarded by, not by governments, but many people in the world as propaganda. It used to be the other way around. But now it's what Israelis say is propaganda and the Palestinians are telling the truth. You can see it in the words that they choose. I mean, the alternative media would talk about genocide. The mainstream media would be very careful about it. So I think, yes, we have here a crisis of narrative, of a battle of narratives. But Israel lost, I think, the battle. Because if you rely only on the establishment to support you, you lose, because it means that you don't believe you have the power to persuade normal people that you are right. Because it's very clear that governments have the reason governments support a narrative is not whether the narrative is true or not. They support the narrative if it's good for the interests of that government. Whereas we hope to believe that people, at least, who don't have interests like this, would want really to know what's going on. And the sense is that they don't get it through the Israeli narrative, and whoever supports it.
What is interesting is that these new channels, we have this perception of them as direct, because we can have access to different narrations of the same events or the same things. But at the same time, social media are owned by companies that have their own interests. Like some of them even, have interests in Israel.
That's right.
Obviously, they know how to manipulate what you're putting there. Like if I put up a video on whatever social media I prefer, and it's talking about Gaza, I'm pretty sure I could be shadow banned.
Yeah.
Pretty soon.
But it's interesting what they didn't take into account, that this is also a story that is reported. So the Israeli narrative is so weak that despite the fact that Meta and similar multinational corporations are working for it, still people can get and counter narrative. Think for the fact that Israel does not allow any journalist to enter Gaza. So the people of Gaza are their own journalists. So everything Meta can do, it can of course manipulate, but still people believe what the smartphones of Gaza told them and not what the IDF spokesperson is telling them. It's a nice thing to know that even Meta has a limitation in its ability to manipulate and observe, because their manipulation became a story, which I don't think they took into account. People are savvy. People know how to go around it. I mean, we know what the algorithm of Meta is. We know how to avoid it, how to work with it. Yes, but it is a struggle. That's why I keep saying Palestine is not just Palestine. It's about anything that does not serve the political elites and economic elites, and people want information from other sources, and the only medium they can do it is a medium owned by the very forces they want to criticize, and yet they managed to do it. They managed to do it not effectively enough to replace governments, but at least to put a counter-narrative. I think it's very convenient for Israel that it would be regarded as a religious conflict because of the very strong Islamophobic tendencies in the West. But of course, it's not a religious conflict. This is a conflict between a colonialist movement and an anti-colonialist movement. It is true that both the colonialist movement and the anti-colonialist movement are much more religious than they were. They began, both of them were more secular. Zionism was a secular movement and the Palestinian resistance was secular. But because the secular colonialist project and the secular anti-colonialist movement did not deliver, did not solve the issues, people went to the religious groups and say, okay, let's give you a chance, see if you can do it better. And they do it better, unfortunately. Namely, the religious Jews are far more, don't care about democracy, so they supposedly get results by expelling Palestinians from the West Bank and genociding them in Gaza. And the anti-colonialist movement is not collaborating like the Palestinian Authority and continues fighting. And although it does not liberate Palestine, at least the sense is that it's not giving in to the oppression. Both sides will not win with only religion on their side. They will have to go back to the secular elements in their societies. But there is an interest in Israel to continue it. It's a religious, and maybe some fundamentalist Muslims also want it to be religious, also fundamentalist Christians. But we have to remember religion has many faces, and there's a lot of trends in Islam and Judaism that can be recruited for peace and not for war, but they are not right now effective.
If there's a difference between the conflicts of yesterday and today's one, is that the ethnic cleansing in 1948 was never sanctioned. And today we are almost there.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's going to happen. But,
Yeah. Well, it hasn't been sanctioned yet, the one in Gaza. Yes, what we have, which is different between 1948, is that in society, in international politics, you have three elements. You have the elites, the civil society, and some intermediary bodies like the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, the United Nations. And in 1948, everyone was so pro-Israel and pro-Zionist that all these elements were anti-Palestinian. Now we have a change of balance of power. The civil society is pro-Palestinian. The political elites are still pro-Israeli. But the intermediary bodies have decided to be on the side of the civil society for the first time. So the ruling of the ICJ and the ICC don't have the power to stop Israel. But they were symbolically important because they used the language of the critics of Israel, not the supporters of Israel. Genocide, apartheid, oppression, colonization. So I think that's a big difference, that there is, the alliance with the Palestinians is far stronger, much more extensive, global. In fact, it's quite impressive. And one of the reasons it is not successful is not so much because of the power of the global alliance with Israel, which is very powerful because it's made of elites, but it's also because there's no Palestinian national movement that can exploit the widespread support for the Palestinians. So they are missing an opportunity, I think, here to do more. Because the world is with, not the political world, the elite world, but many sections of the world are with them like never before with Palestine. But you need to exploit it and they can exploit it if they have a united leadership that says, we know what to do with your support. Now you have the support, but you don't have someone to receive it.
it's also difficult when you're a victim of such an attack, like literally.
Absolutely. That's why it's the role of the Palestinians on the outside to do that. You're right. The ones on the inside cannot do it. They are fighting for their life. They don't have time to strategize. But those from the outside can do it, should do that. Maybe one day they will. I hope they will. It's better to have a binational state than a conflict. But I still hope for one democratic state, not binational state. Yes, I do believe. I think it is actually more likely to happen. The problem is, I always hoped that it will happen through negotiation, consent. I now feel it will be happening after a collapse, destruction, vacuum, and so on. So I don't like the scenario, but I think that's the more realistic one. You first have the collapse, the disintegration, the void, and then it's easier to build a new vision. I still hope that it's possible to do it without violence, but I'm not sure that's possible anymore. But I still have to hope so. But that depends on the international community. Is it willing to stop Israel? Is it willing to change its perception what's wrong in Israel and Palestine and what should be the way forward.
Is it like concrete possibility for Israel to conquer more and more?
No, there will be a limit. I don't think they're interested, by the way, in occupying more territory. What they're interested in is getting rid of more Palestinians. Is it possible? Yes, they have the power to do it. They did. They are genociding Palestinians and nobody is stopping them, right? So yeah, unfortunately, Israel has the power to destroy the Palestinians even more. But they will not, the Palestinians will not disappear. And there will always be Palestinians, and there will always be the problem that they are ruling over another people. And these people are not going away and are not going to give up.
Would people in this final, vision you have, hope you have, would people be able to come together and live as equals?
Yes, they lived like this before 48. Muslim, Christian, and Jews lived together. I don't idealize it, but I think yes, it is possible. I think a lot of places in the world, people were bleeding each other to death and found a way of living together, despite a very harsh history of mutual violence. So yes, I do think so. I think most people would be happy to live a normal life, because both Israelis and Palestinians don't live normal life at all. So I think most people, if you give them the opportunity, would prefer normal life. It's more difficult for the Jews because they have privileges, they are the masters class, and it's not easy for them to give it up. But I think they will have to. I also think it's better for them, but they don't understand it yet.